afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's exclusive webinar, Unmasking Insider Fraud, Mitigating Risk to Your Business, proudly hosted by Verifile. In an era where internal threats and economic crime are constantly evolving, it has become more critical than ever for businesses to take proactive measures in safeguarding their organisations. Insider fraud poses a significant risk. Today, we'll be exploring how fraud can affect businesses of all sizes and industries, and we'll look at the most effective strategies to mitigate the growing threat. I'm excited to introduce you to our hosts for this session, Angela, Abby, and Tom, Verifile's King's Award-winning insider fraud experts. Together, they'll provide you with vital insights into recognising and addressing insider threat, as well as a broader look at the rising challenges of fraud from abroad. By the end of this session, you'll have a clearer understanding on how to defend your organisation from these ever-evolving threats. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please submit any questions you have via our Q&A section, and we will answer these at the end. So I'd like to hand over to Angela.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining the webinar. Hopefully you'll find it insightful. So why are we talking about fraud mitigation? So having been in business for 20 years, we've uncovered a lot of insider fraud for our customers. So our work sees us operate in a variety of sectors, I'd say mainly in regulated industries, and that will be industries such as financial, healthcare, education, but many of our customers benefit from working with a partner that can help them become more compliant and reduce their level of risk. So with the changes in our economic environment and also development within technology, it's more important than ever to be aware of all the risks before you hire someone. So an interesting element of what we do sees many customers in various sectors looking to criminal record checks alone when screening new and existing employees. So criminal record checks, although very useful, shouldn't be relied upon in isolation. They should be complemented with other background checks to ensure a clear picture is being built of the candidate. Also, a DBS check may come back clear, however, it won't reveal ongoing investigations or detail of criminal history in other countries unless it's specifically processed, like an international criminal record check, for example. They will also not necessarily highlight concerning behaviours that didn't lead to a conviction, unlike other checks such as social media. So by combining criminal record checks with other screening methods such as reference checks, open source intelligence, fraud and sanctions and media searches, you can gain a more rounded picture, and this will provide you with the level of compliance as HR professionals that you require to protect your business. So as we will explain, there are significant financial repercussions that also fall upon the HR and compliance departments if audits find that you have weak screening processes in place, and that inadvertently puts your business at risk. So main thing, a robust screening policy is key for HR and compliance teams for several reasons, not just for risk management, but also for consistency and reputation management. So what is, let's have a little look at what is insider fraud. So insider fraud within the employment space, this relates to employees exploiting their access to sensitive information or systems to enable them to commit things such as expense fraud, financial or procurement fraud, or data theft. So a single breach with an employee can cost your business significantly. And if there's holes in your screening process, it can also cause reputational damage, which can be difficult to come back from. So let's have a little look at the different types of insider fraud. So there's quite a few. Here's some of them that we'll have a little look at. There is embezzlement, for example. This falls under financial fraud. And this is where someone is entrusted with money or assets and they misappropriate them for personal gain. This usually involves people in positions of trust, so board members, seniors, that type of role. Also, you have things such as payroll fraud. So this is when an employee manipulates the payroll system in order to take money that they're not entitled to. Obviously, that can cover various levels depending on the role. Other things such as procurement fraud and bribes. So quite common, employees receiving financial gain for favourable contracts, such as bid rigging, invoice fraud, kickbacks, receiving gifts or payments for awarding contracts, for example. And then there's also invoice and expense fraud. So this involves claiming false or inflated expenses to gain unauthorised benefits, and that can be duplicate invoices or fake expenses. There's also more practical things such as theft of business assets. So this can be physical theft, so equipment, office supplies. Also, there's data theft and stealing of sensitive information, which can be sold on for profit. Another one is intellectual property theft. So this is unauthorized use, distribution or copy of creative work. And that's like selling of inventions or systems or stealing confidential information such as business formulas or designs. And then also very, very common, we find this all the time, conflict of interest. So this is employees making decisions that benefit themselves or associates. And this is usually senior levels and positions of trust. It can be things such as undisclosed relationships, dual business interests, for example. So a robust fitness and propriety form included in the screening package can highlight against a candidate's transparency around business conflicts, for example, as well as other things. So why is it important that you implement risk management? So there's obviously several reasons why. We'll look at a few. Firstly, we'll look at enhancing your security processes. So this will help protect your business against technology threats. Also, candidates with access to sensitive data, they can misuse their privileges and possibly not intentionally, it could be accidentally, but these can lead to significant breaches, which can also lead to business damage and also financial loss. So you want to protect against financial loss and business reputation. So to do this on a wider spectrum, you're going to want to utilise a combination of strategies for this. So most importantly, it all starts with robust background screening policy, which should include comprehensive background checks and regular updates and monitoring. So by identifying those risks early, you can address them before they escalate. Also your staff. So you're going to want to attract a workforce driven by transparency and integrity. And this always starts with your background screening policy. So ensure your policy is strong, clear and consistent. And another reason is compliance and legality. So ensuring compliance with regulatory requirements will help you avoid fines and also negative publicity. One reason to do so is the introduction of the Economic and Crime and Transparency Bill, which we will have a little look at. So what is that? So this is something which has come into play quite recently. So the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Bill is aimed at addressing economic crime, of course, and enhancing transparency around that and in corporate entities. So what this essentially means, overarching, what's the big thing about it? It's now about accountability. So this means that failure to prevent fraud offences will mean severe penalties for the company and its directors. So it's not just the business, it's also the individuals that work for that business as well, which obviously really raises the stakes in terms of accountability. So both companies and individuals can be fined and convicted if found liable. Other things, it also strengthens company house reforms. So that sees greater control around verifying and monitoring the information it receives. And that root out things like illegitimate businesses and money laundering, for example. Audits will also look to your regulatory or reducing the risk of fines and reputational damage by implementing procedures to support the bill. There are background checks that help identify candidates with a history of financial misconduct, which you can include in your policy. We can obviously support with guidance, any guidance that you might need. So let's have a little look at the crimes which are punishable by the bill. So there's quite a few, covers quite a lot, false accounting, insider trading, of course, cybercrime, embezzlement, tax evasion, bribery, money laundering, and as well as terrorist financing. So the way to support yourself in relation to the bill is all about background checks. These are key to managing these risks: identity checks, criminal record checks, credit searches and sanctions, employment, and checks such as CIFAS checks. So CIFAS in particular will help with information sharing, such as data-driven insights, and it will also protect against financial fraud and identity theft.
Thank you very much, Angie. Hi, my name's Abby. Thank you for joining us today, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Credit Industry Fraud Avoidance Scheme, quite handily abbreviated to CIFAS. So you may already be aware of CIFAS, but for the benefit of those who've not heard of them before, they have been around since 1988. They are a reciprocal system for sharing information. So if you think of how a credit bureau shares information about consumer financial habits, CIFAS has collated years of information about fraudulent activities. And the database is actually split into two parts. We have a national fraud database, which is mainly related to to consumers and services. So fake applications for lending, bogus organisations selling produce. And then we have the other database, which is more relevant to the conversation we are having today. It used to be called the Internal Fraud Database. It is now called the Insider Threat Database. You can see where this is going. And this information is all about employees. So information that has been declared by the members to CIFAS about instances of fraud that they have discovered in the workplace. CIFAS is a fantastic organisation. Go check them out. Lots of information. There's training material there, and they really are the experts on fraud in the workplace in the UK. They've also helped provide us with some quite intimidating statistics. So we're all aware of the cost of living crisis at the moment, and you can see that the insider threats, this is employee fraud, listings are up by 15% on 2023. There's been a 17% increase in employees committing internal fraud within their first year of employment. And what sort of fraud are we seeing? Well, lying on a CV, so embellishment of job titles, omissions about gap periods, inflation of salary or duties accounts for 33% of all listings. But the biggest factor in this is that nearly 50% of all listings are actually down to theft or deception from the employer. Okay, so we've had some examples and we've had some numbers. Let's look at some real life cases. So we have prepared a rogues gallery for you here. Up first are our trio, all of which have been found guilty and convicted for theft from their employer. Claire Boland stole over £300,000 during her time as an NHS manager. She only received a 3-year sentence for this, only half of which will be served. Probably most concerning is the fact that after 3 years, this record will drop off her criminal record. So there'll be no trace of the fact that she stole over £300,000. Lorna Porter, a slightly different scenario, but she still defrauded to the extent of over £600,000. Using her position to create false invoices and divert funds. And this fraud went on over a period of 6 years and was only discovered during an audit. She too received a very short sentence, a 4-year custodial sentence. And again, that record will be expunged 3 years after it has been completed. And the last but not least is Leslie Stewart, who was an office manager, again, financially motivated and has the opportunity and the skills to steal £300,000 from her employer, was clever in changing HMRC declarations, and was actually accumulating up to £8,000 a month at one point. She was since jailed for 3 years and 4 months. Moving on now to 2 more sinister individuals, we're going to sort of touch on the subject of safeguarding here. So up first is our convicted sex trafficker, originally from Nigeria, latterly in France, and then moved to the UK to escape his prosecution. He was convicted in his absence of 6 years for offences relating to sex trafficking. And despite being screened to a high level in terms of an enhanced DBS check in the UK, he was successful in securing work with the charity, as there was no record of his overseas convictions. Furthermore, this highlights a gap really in screening policies by the charity, whilst they were only obligated to do a minimum, which was the enhanced check, which is a very good check. It was no means comprehensive enough to capture somebody who had spent periods of time from abroad. So he was actually he was captured. He was trying to return back to Nigeria and was actually extradited to France, where he's appealing this conviction at the moment. Moving on to Tom Singleton. Terrifying situation where a head teacher, who was also the safeguarding leader at his primary school, has been convicted of sex offences. The most serious offences that could be brought. He's only been given 5 years of a sentence. He will be on the sex offenders registry for life. A DBS check will show that he's on a barred list. However, should he seek employment where such high level of screening isn't needed or isn't, heaven forbid, carried out at all, then he has the opportunity. He may find himself in a situation where he may be working close proximity to children or vulnerable individuals again. So we've all heard of the Grenfell Tower inquiry. We have an individual here, Carl Stokes, who kind of fell into a position of trust, and then it was only found during the inquiry, which was obviously several years after the tragedy occurred, is that actually he had misrepresented him. He wasn't actually even qualified for the position to which he'd been employed. He'd been red flagged by the London Fire Brigade, but nothing had been done. So whilst he's not entirely culpable for the disaster, and there have been many findings during the inquiry, had a more vigorous rescreening policy being followed, then potentially this individual could have been replaced, and maybe some measures to mitigate against what happened would have been achieved. And then finally, a very recent one, this is Brandon Lung, again had the motive in that he was suffering from debt, and the opportunity in that he was in a position where cash transactions and chip and pin transactions were easily completed. He just inserted his own chip and pin device instead of the company one, and was able to divert about £4,000. Interesting, he already had a conviction for theft, and actually they took pity on him at his sentencing because he was so far in debt, and that his sentence was quite minor, and his fine was only £200, and he wasn't expected to return the £4,000 that he stole. But again, I think we can look at this and think what could have been done that maybe would have prevented him from moving into that role and having the opportunity to become a repeat offender. And that kind of leads me nicely onto the available tools that are out there to help you and your organisation protect against fraudsters. So I'm going to hand you over now to my colleague Tom, who's going to talk about how to mitigate this risk.
Brilliant. Thanks, Abby. Hi, everyone. So as Angie and Abby have kind of already touched on already, they've covered a number of things about internal fraud, and they've covered a number of checks as well. But I want to sort of dig a little bit deeper into sort of the different checks that you can do, industry specific and also for everyone as well. So just to dive a little bit more into that. The first thing I want to highlight is it's not just doing the checks that's the important part. It's kind of also showing that you've got the checks in place that acts as a massive deterrent for people trying to target your business. So, I mean, if you think of real life examples of sort of protecting yourself, you put, a security alarm on your house to deter from burglars. I mean, I've got a steering wheel lock on my car. Unfortunately, my car was stolen a few years ago. So what I did is then I put a steering wheel lock on my car, but I sort of wish I'd have done that beforehand, so sort of prevention rather than the cure. So again, with the screening, you don't want to do the screening because you've previously been burnt. You want to sort of get it up front, so you're not sort of in the case where you've been someone's done fraud in your business. You've got the right sort of legislation and all that kind of stuff in place before that happens to you. So extreme cases of it happening, people like Ian Huntley, he targeted schools where he knew screening wasn't taking place. Obviously got into to be a caretaker in a number of schools because of that. We just looked at Brandon then. So even though he had a past conviction, he might have looked at the business and knew they didn't do the relevant checks on them, so he could just go into that business and not be checked. So it's good to make sure, you've got that deterrent there just to start with, so they don't try and look for gaps in your process and try and exploit that before they've even started with you. So going on to sort of some of the checks that we can use to mitigate these risks. The first one I want to point out is identity checks. So again, the main reason I want to kind of point this out is it's kind of the reason Verifile even exists in the first place. So 20 years ago, our CEO was coming over to England, and about a week before that happened, there was a story in the news where a guy had just started a job at a company called Brinks, delivering cash to banks, and he was driving with his boss and went to the local bank. His boss went into the bank, and then as soon as he went off, he went, "See you later," and drove off with £5 million and was never seen again. But they went back to Brinks and thought, well, we actually screened this person. How come we didn't see this was a problem? And turns out he'd used a fake ID, and it hid his criminal record that was on his real identity. So even though they'd done some relevant screening checks, they hadn't even checked they were checking the right person in the first place. So it's all well and good doing all these checks, but if you don't even know you're checking the right person, that's obviously what can happen. And then when Ao was studying his master's and he moved over, as he was moving over, he had to change his address on his ID. And this simple process took like 3 hours. And he's thinking, why is it taking me 3 hours to change my address? And then some guy can just nip off with 5 million and he's not even checked properly. So he sort of had a bit of an idea when he was doing his masters. And then, he thought of an idea to bring Verifile to board. Again, there was a bit of a gap in the market. And again, ID checks, of course, was one of the first things that we did. And then, as you can sort of see, we've grown a lot and had a load of different checks that we offer. And are really, really important. So things like right to work checks, again, you all know right to work. The main reason why I want to sort of point this right to work out is it is the one mandatory check that everyone legally has to do. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. I'm sure you probably all know that anyway. But you need to make sure that right to work, of course, is a check that you do. Huge fines can come into play with right to work. I think unlimited fines can happen if you don't do the right checks. If it conspires, they didn't have the right to work check, but you did everything you possibly could and you got the statutory excuse, then that's okay. That there's no fines involved there. But making sure you do that check is really important. But I want to kind of point out here, it's don't just do the minimum, as Abby mentioned earlier with the guy from Nigeria. Unfortunately, they did the bare minimum, which was doing the enhanced DBS check, which is obviously very important. But because they didn't do international checks and other things, that's where that kind of things wasn't pulled up. You've got like industry specific checks like qualified teacher status check and FCA compliance checks. So again, not relevant for everyone, but if you are in those industries or you are in an industry, you want to have a look at the sort of specific checks that can be done. Like qualified teacher status check, if they're barred or they've got sanctions or restrictions from education, that won't always pop up on an enhanced DBS check. So it's really important you do those kind of things. And again, things like credit checks, you might think, oh, we're in the retail industry, we're not in the finance industry. That's not really important for us. But as Abby mentioned about the cost of living crisis, people are more now susceptible to potentially opportunistic fraud. So again, if they've got bad credit, it doesn't mean this person's terrible, don't hire them. But that fitness and proprietary form that's mentioned on the bottom right there, that gives them the opportunity to be upfront about it. So, in interview stage or in the screening stage, they can say, look, yeah, I do have a CCJ that I had recently. This was the reason for it. And then it does come up, okay, they're honest, that's fine, no worries. But if they tried to hide that from you, and maybe they're working on the tills and they've got access to the money, all that kind of stuff, like Brandon was as well, that's where they can be more susceptible to it. So yeah, it is important to do those kind of checks. Like credit checks are instant, really, really quick and cheap to do. And again, it just gives that little bit of due diligence and a little bit of extra peace of mind that you've done the right checks there, and it's all good. So if we go on to sort of other checks that we do offer, I'm going to go into a lot more detail about media checks, and that's a really hot topic at the moment. So I'm going to go into more detail about those ones on the left-hand side. But just to sort of point out the ones on the right-hand side as well. So international checks, I won't steal Abby's thunder. She's going to go into a little bit more about fraud from abroad and all that kind of stuff. But as we kind of already alluded to with the Nigerian gentleman, really, really important to sort of do checks from places they may have resided before, because they can commit crime outside of the UK and the UK checks won't cover that kind of thing. So again, really important to do that. And also continuous monitoring. So sort of linking onto the Grenfell one that we touched on before, he got into the job because they didn't do any continuous monitoring when he got to other places. So he was a fireman before, and he thought, okay, yeah, he's probably got the relevant qualifications, and didn't bother checking. If they would have done the checking, they realised he wasn't qualified for the role. And also not just things like qualifications and moving roles, it's also about continuous monitoring about things that happen all the time. So criminal records, as soon as you get a criminal record check, unfortunately it kind of expires the day you get it, because they can commit a crime the next day. Social media, obviously they can update it every second, and all that kind of thing. So that's why it's really important to continuously monitor your staff. Again, some of the examples that we use with people that were in the business for a couple of years and then thought, okay, I'm now in a position of trust, I can now try and exploit it and commit fraud in different ways there. So that's why it's important to sort of continuously monitor on that way. And the final thing I want to point out before I go onto the trends is it's not just protecting the business that's important, it's also protecting yourselves. So unfortunately, if there is fraud that committed in your business, the first place they're going to look is HR, and they're going to say, what did we do or what did you do to mitigate the risks of this happening? So I mean, if you just said, okay, I did a right to work check, I did a criminal record check, but actually if we'd have done a media search or we'd have done a credit check, we could have potentially seen this coming up front, that's when they can't look at you and say you can kind of be sort of looked at to blame there. And again, if you do all the checks that you didn't just do your basic checks, you did all your mitigating risk, and you said, look, I did everything I possibly could have. They can say, well, of course you did. There's nothing more you could have done, which is unfortunately we got burnt there, but you did all the relevant checks and you've sort of protected yourself. So again, you obviously want to protect the business, but also you want to make sure you protect yourself as well in that case, and make sure that it's you've done everything you can to mitigate that fraud as well. Cool. So on to customer trends. So as you can probably have already seen already, just a bit of growth in sort of the checks. You want to sort of keep up with the Joneses and sort of see what everyone else is doing. You don't just want to sort of guess what you need to do. You want to see, what the company next to you is also doing. So this is a comparison from 2 years ago to what it is now. So obviously massive growth in things on the left-hand side, as you can see. Again, senior roles, and obviously, as Abby mentioned, about the CIFAS as well. But on the right-hand side is the really sort of eye-catching stuff. So this is more we've sort of figured out as a response to the remote and hybrid working landscape. So again, digital techs to do that, because obviously people might not be coming into the office anymore. They don't have to come into office to do that right to work check if they've got the relevant documents to do so. So again, digital right to work, as I'm sure a lot of you do already. That's been a massive growth. Criminal records, to be honest, is always growing. People always do criminal record checks and always will do. I'm not trying to downplay the importance of criminal record checks. Of course, absolutely, they're the sort of the key, the main check that a lot of people do, and a lot of people do them because they think it's the only check that you can do. So again, it will always continue to grow. But as we're saying, there's a lot of things that now can't be found on criminal record checks. So it's important to do other things as well. And that kind of leads nicely on to that massive growth, as you can see there, 453% rise in the last 2 years on social media searches. Which obviously is astronomical. Not just only because people, again, because they're working remotely, they want to sort of see what they're like outside a professional environment because they don't get to see them in the office every day. But also a lot of regulators are now recommending it. So FCA are recommending that you do the social media checks, and also keeping children safe in education, they're now recommending that you do social media checks on staff before they start as well. So on the social media and the media, I want to sort of quickly go on to the different media searches that we do. I'll just take a quick sip of water. So on the global fraud and sanctions, so to sort of go through them in order. So fraud and sanctions, this is a very straightforward instant check that checks a global database of about 4 million individuals. So to be honest, you've got to be a pretty bad person to be on this list, but that's why it's really important to do it. Again, fraud. So again, what we're talking about today is why it's important to do it. So this looks at like your serious stuff like terrorism, money laundering, drug trafficking, arms dealing, war crimes, white collar fraud, adverse media in that side. So again, politically exposed persons as well in relation to that. So again, a really quick, simple search to do, especially if you're in the financial sector or again, hiring senior individuals. It's really important to do that check. Media search, again, we've kind of already covered off the reasons why this would be really beneficial from the examples that Abby showed. So as she mentioned, Claire Boland, Tom Singleton, those records are going to be off their basic criminal record check in 3 to 5 years. So if you just do that criminal record check, thankfully with Tom Singleton, if he wants to do an education role, he'll have to do an enhanced DBS check, and of course that will pop up on there. But if he went into a role, as Abby mentioned, that wasn't including that, didn't need to have a basic DBS check done, he could sort of slip through the net if you're not doing a thing like a media search, and that would obviously come up immediately with a media search to sort of see. I mean, as we've already shown you. So again, why it's important to do more than just the basics. And of course, the hot topic, the one that everyone wants to sort of talk about, is social media. So I know social media can sometimes be like, you think of a bit of a taboo subject, and you sort of think, I don't want to look at their private stuff and all that kind of thing. To sort of nip that in the bud, it is really not that at all. So it's fully GDPR compliant. It's only publicly available information. So we're not going to look at people's private accounts. You look at what they're doing at the weekend and all that kind of stuff, and taking their password and all that kind of thing. It is just information that literally anyone could search that and they could find it. Of course, we've got like a tool that will search it a lot quicker than that, and then we can go through it that way. But anyone, if they wanted to, if they want to maliciously look at your company, I mean, if you hire someone senior, they might go, okay, let me just look at this person's social media, search a couple of buzzwords, and then say Verifile hired someone that was tweeting things that weren't politically correct, for example. They think, oh, if Verifile are hiring someone who can put this out there into the world, then what kind of company does that mean Verifile are? So again, it's protecting your brand a lot, so mitigating that kind of risk. Also, unconscious bias. So again, I like to think, obviously, I wouldn't do this or no one else would do this as well, but it sort of privately protects you against, it reduces like the discrimination accusations that they can do. If you say like, they didn't hire me because they saw something on my social media. We're not going to pull up their personal stuff, as I mentioned. So an example, I'm a Newcastle fan. If I saw someone was a Sunderland fan, I might not want to hire them unconsciously. Hopefully I wouldn't be doing that, but you never know. So again, that you would never see that information. So again, you've never got that unconscious bias then put into you. It's only the stuff that's the red flag material. And talking about red flag material, it's not all red flag and doom and gloom. It is positive stuff as well. So they've got any volunteering stuff or charitable work that will pop up there as well. But of course, the thing that people most look for is that, as you can see there, 20% of our candidates last year had a red flag on their report. And that could be things like extreme views, hateful behavior, violence, sexually explicit content, all that kind of stuff will come up on there. So again, that's the sort of thing you want to have a look at and sort of protect your brand on that side, and also sort of find out what they're like outside of a professional environment and confirm their suitability for the role. And last but not least, adverse internet. So you may think adverse internet might be similar to a media search. Not really. So adverse internet, it does cover that stuff as well. But as you can see, I'm sure everyone's done it when they're hiring someone. You might have a quick Google search and sort of see what they're like and have a look at the first page. So this obviously isn't just the first page. It's over 1,000 different search engines and also the invisible web that it includes. Real life examples of this. So again, one of our clients was hiring someone recently. Every check come back green. Criminal was fine. Social media was fine. References were great. But their adverse internet search showed that they had created a website and they were the head of a fox hunting group. And this company was quite a large college in the UK, and they obviously didn't want that person representing them. And again, they had been arrested for it, as they'd actually even announced on their website, but they didn't get a criminal conviction for it. So that's why it wouldn't have popped up in like a media search or anything like that, or a criminal record search. But they put that internet search out there, and it's just sort of checking that kind of web as well. So it's sort of showing there's a lot of things you can do to try and mitigate your risk, and it's media searches are something that's really, really prevalent now, and a lot of people are doing, and you shouldn't be scared of doing it, because it's not it's not private information, it's just public information that protects your brand and make sure you're hiring the right person. Cool. So enough of me, and I'm going to hand back over to Abby. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit now about the bigger picture. We've focused quite a lot today on the UK or the domestic side of screening. We've talked about CIFAS and the different levels of DBS checks, but it's a big place in the world, and some high migrations, and the effect of COVID means there's a lot more remote working as well. So your employee base may have expanded, and so it'd be worth pointing out some of the considerations or additional considerations that should be undertaken if you are appointing somebody from outside of the UK. So going to circle back a little bit about identity confirmation. So it's more important than ever to know that your candidate is exactly who they claim to be. We are going to send out the presentation afterwards, and there's some links on here which will take you to some articles on our website which will give you some greater context about names. But it's really important to appreciate that somebody can be who they claim to be, and even have documentation that suggests that is genuine. But would you know if a South Africa driving license is a genuine document? Would you recognise a Nigerian passport? What other checks can be done to establish that person is exactly who they are, other than presenting you with a UK passport or driving licence? Right to work in the UK. So we're a little bit beyond Brexit now, but the scope of right to work is still as important as ever. It's not just if a candidate has a right to work. Do they have a permanent right to work? Do they have a time-limited right to work? The penalties for employing somebody who you have reasonable cause to believe is an illegal worker are severe. That's up to 5 years custodial sentence or an unlimited fine. So it is a minefield. There is a lot of legislation and a lot of information out there. Pop over to our website. There's more information there, or speak to a member of our team if you've got any questions around that very complex piece of legislation. And then another subject we've not really touched on today as well is the fake degree and employment reference business. So whilst it is illegal to supply a fraudulent academic certificate, you can go onto many websites, including Etsy, and create get a template and create your own degree to give you your doctorate from Cambridge University, and you can attempt to pass that off. We have many years of experience and lots of tools to help us determine if a employment or academic reference is genuine. There's another link on our website there which will tell you more about that, and obviously also go through the benefits. So after you finish this, have a look at this, pop over there, and then also pop some questions over to us if you would like to know more about either of those subjects. We've talked about tools that we've got available to us. So with identity verification, wherever possible, you need to conduct face-to-face meetings, and that could be in person or it could be done via a video link. Try and see original identity documents and take copies. Harking back to what Tom said, it's all about protecting yourself. So what you can provide as evidence that demonstrated that you've carried out full due diligence. So should something happen, you can say that we did this, this and this. It's also very useful to have all those documents on file for the right to work piece as well. We offer over 100 different types of identity verification products in 50 different countries, and we are constantly developing new products. Criminal record checks, not downplaying the importance of all the new checks such as social media and those parts as well. Criminal records are still the core check. Where we differ from many other screening companies though is that majority of our records will come direct from the issuing authority such as the police or Ministry of Justice. Other background screening firms will offer you a criminal record check, but actually you find out it's a court history check, and information may be missing from the information that they provide to you. We have over 200 products covering 150 countries and jurisdictions and more in development. Other tools that we have available to us, so if people are motivated for financial gain, then carrying out a financial integrity or a credit check, we can cover those over many different countries. There are other specialist databases other than CIFAS, such as FASIS in the US and ASIC in Australia. And then again, as Tom has been talking about, the growing use and demand for the media searches, social media, adverse internet and news articles and publications. Probably one thing I haven't mentioned on there as well is that the digital ID piece, which we've got in the UK, which is sort of transformed the identity checking part of DBS checks. We are working on developing a global solution, so a liveness / selfie check to correlate against a document check as well, and we're really hoping to release that sometime in 2025 to make the ID verification piece that little bit easier for our customers. And back to you, Angie.
Lovely, thanks Abby. So becoming less attractive to fraudsters. So this is looking at the larger landscape, and it's making yourself less of a target to people who are going to try and infiltrate the business. So your background screening policy is key. So you'll need to make sure that it's clear, it's available to candidates at the outset, and that it's standardized across your business. So make sure you include basic checks at a minimum. So that would be things such as identity, right to work, criminal checks. We'd also recommend employment, CV comparison, sanctions and social media checks, obviously depending on the role. We can help you with best practice if needed. Another thing that's really important is vendor and third-party management. So it's not just about the background screening partner that you choose and how they manage and secure and store and transfer data. It's all about the supply chain. So it's all who they work with as well. So make sure that you're choosing a screening provider who has a robust supplier due diligence program in place to make sure that suppliers they work with are handling data appropriately, and make sure that you work with a partner who also has Cyber Essentials Plus in place as well for system security, really important. Another thing that you'll want to do is leverage technology. So automating the smart areas of your process will help you obtain fast results, which of course is what everybody needs in the industry, various industries, and it also come from a centralized source. But it will also help you scale as well with confidence. So if you've got automated processes in place, you'll be secure and you can scale more easily. 70% of our processes are automated. we believe in, obviously, of course, quality reporting. So we have manual sense checking as well as automated processes as well, which is critical, really, especially for regulated industries. So you've got the advancement of the technology and the fast checking, but you've also got the sense checking of people over the top. So that's the best way you're going to get the full coverage. And then also, not to mention, continuous monitoring and rechecking. So this is really important for identifying issues early. So we can support you with guidance around your screening policy. But some of the most important points in relation to rechecking are communication to the candidates. This is really important. So clearly outline the checks that they will undertake and the messaging that goes out to existing candidates. This needs to be tailored to the population accordingly. And this will help with faster uptake, and it will also reduce any sort of anxiety or concerns about the process that they might be undertaking, because that process for existing employees is different to new hires. And understanding that will really help you get fast uptake and get full results back as well. Thanks.
Lovely. Thank you so much. We're just going to pop a quick poll into the chat. Just want to get some insight from yourselves to see which industries did we find the most discrepancies in this year. So I've just popped that in. So please do take a few moments to have a vote and think about any questions that you do want to pop over to us. And I think as we've seen over this webinar, we've seen various different industries be hit via insider fraud. We can see coming out on top banking and financial services, a few there under charities, retail. Okay, shall we see what the results were?
Okay, top 3 industries with the most discrepancies were financial and business services and construction. So in terms of banking and financial sector and business services, this is probably due to the regulatory reforms. So there's stricter requirements around the employment referencing, compliance referencing. Obviously, you've got the 6-year activity period. There's also the enhanced detail, which will highlight a greater amount of adverse findings. There's also a more complex job history as well. Some of those roles go back 10 years screening as well. And there's also the requirement to verify licenses and qualifications. So that's why we're finding more discrepancies in those areas. In relation to construction, this is around increased mobility and high turnover. So this is high turnover and skill shortages because there's pressure to fill these roles quickly. So checks which came up most in terms of discrepancies are employment referencing, qualification checks, CV comparisons, financial checks and sanctions, and feedback on most insightful check was social media.
Lovely, thank you so much.
So I just wanted to say hello, I'm Steph. You might spot me posting and replying in the HR Ninjas group on behalf of Verifile. So we are currently running a special offer for webinar attendees, and you can enjoy 5% off your first 3 months of invoices. And if you do have any questions or you'd like to chat to us outside of the webinar about how our screening can benefit your company, then feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or drop us an email or give us a call on the contact details on the screen. We will be sending you the slides for and the recording for today's webinar, so you'll have all of this written down. And as an extra bonus, I'll be adding Angie and Tom into the HR Ninjas group very soon. So you'll have all 3 of us available for advice on screening whenever you need it. And I do hope you have found this session valuable. If there is a specific topic you'd like us to cover in future webinars, whether it's right to work, BPSS, or maybe a deeper dive into social media, then please let me know. We are always open to your suggestions.
If there is anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to go over again or talk about, please let us know. Be happy to answer any questions at any time, not just on the webinar. You can contact us direct as well, and we can help you.
Yes, so thank you so much to Lisa and Abby and Ange and Tom for taking their time to share their knowledge with us, and thank everyone for joining us.